to the Businessmen and Women of Color podcast. I am your host, Ann Alston, and it is once again my pleasure to bring quality programs to all of you. I am especially excited today because I have a special guest speaker here for the first time on the podcast. We're going to have Michael Alston, who is the co-founder of ALSTNTEC. He's going to talk a little bit about his expertise in the transportation industry and the mechanic field, so I'm really excited to talk about that. We also have a great deal number of other participants who is on this platform for 2018. So this is definitely the platform to be on if you're looking to promote your business and share information about your industry. Just in case you did not know, the purpose of the BMWOC podcast is to not only share our industry information, but to encourage you, the working professional, career seekers, college students, high school students, to think about different lines of work that we're advertising here on this platform. So please take a moment to visit all of the pages and listen to all of the podcasts that we have going on this year. It is phenomenal. There's a lot of great information being shared. You cannot get this anywhere else other than the BMWOC podcast. One of the first things we want to do before we get started today is thank our corporate partners, Kat Serrano, LLC, Sherwood Empowers, Concern and Learning, Evangelism Radio, Genesis Preferred Solutions, J Coach International, Nails Tax Help, My Financial Home, Power, STCI, and the Student Teacher, along with our other business affiliate sponsors, and everyone on this podcast who is helping to make this event a success. So today, again, I am excited because for the first time in a couple of years, I have my partner, co-partner, husband, my everything, okay, and I'm going to say everything. He is the co-founder of ALSTNTEC and the chairman of Destination Achievers Incorporated, which is Destination Achievers is our new 501(c) nonprofit here in Maryland and Detroit, Michigan, where we are helping to bring outreach programs for career and business development. Michael brings more than 20 years of transportation and logistical experience to the table. He understands the importance of using education to improve business processes and meet strategic goals. Through his dedication and commitment, Michael works to successfully oversee and implement several key projects in the mechanic field to ensure his success, and he also helps and facilitate workshops and events that directly affect the bottom line. And as a result of his efforts, he is able to help with new structures, policies, and organization. His vision is to find the problem, work the problem, and resolve the problem. So welcome, Michael. You're on the podcast today. Thank you for being here and also being a co-founder and partner on ALSTNTEC. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. We're very, very excited today to be a part of this. I see that your podcast has been very, very successful, and this is, I think, your third edition of this.
This is the third year. That's right. So, we've been doing great work.
Hopefully, I'm happy to be a small part of that, and like I said, it's just happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, again, this is a podcast that talks about industry professions. And so you are in the transportation industry. And so the purpose of this particular interview is to really talk about the importance of transportation because, again, we have a lot of stigma going on when it comes to high school students and what careers that they are going into when they go into a degree program. But I don't think that transportation is one of them. And I want to bring to light the importance of transportation and particularly the mechanic field that you're in because there is a tremendous shortage of qualified mechanics. So let's just start by introducing who you are for the people who are listening, who you are, where you're from, and how did you get into transportation?
Okay, well, my name is Michael Alston, and basically, born and raised in Washington, D.C., and I got into transportation early on, or got into the idea of becoming a mechanic. And it wasn't the idea of the mechanic, it was actually seeing something move and knowing how it's moving. I started off by watching TV shows like The Knight Rider and Blue Thunder and Speed Racer, the cartoon, and I was always excited about the fact that everybody go fast. And I always wondered, how do they stop? Speed, great, but how do you control it? The vehicle itself, you like to slide across the hood like Deuce of Hazzard, but how come the doors never open? things of that nature, and the reason why. So that kind of pushed me in that direction of finding out the most important tool that humans use is the automobile.
Okay.
Okay, so that when that came along, it was very hard because back then when I was growing up, mostly Caucasians were the mechanic. You know, you take your car, you know, your brakes, and just, you know, whatever you want to get fixed. And then when you ask a question, why is this not working, they like to give you this look on your face like, we're not telling you. So after getting involved with the Marionberry program, summer school, basically he opened up opportunities for young kids back then to test out what they want to do when they were growing up. So I actually tried to become a computer board, design.
A computer technician? You tried to become a computer
I tried to
okay.
design computer boards, and what interested me about that was the electronics of it. You know, I was into voltage, but then it got really complicated when you start writing code, and so I left that alone. Then we got into welding. Now I tried the welding, and then I realized that welding was another creation or outlet, but it really didn't open up what I really wanted to do. However, when I was walking home one day, going to Savannah Terrace in Southeast, I met this old mechanic on the ground, maybe no more about 65, 70. And when I was walking past, he dropped the wrench on the ground and said, "Hey, can you hand me this wrench?" I'm looking around, and I'm like, "What is a wrench?"
Oh, wow.
That's when a whole world opened up for me, because this individual not only told me what a wrench was, but what the wrench does and how to use the wrench. So I was very excited when I went to my mother, and my mother was like, "Hey, if you into this thing, try to find a way to get in more into it," because she didn't know anything about it. The problem with that is that I was more interested in learning more about the car than going to school.
Okay.
So school became boring. Not saying that it's not important, but the more that the individual taught me about changing brakes, doing tires, I thought he was a guru. Didn't know that was general technology. I didn't know that was a general repair. But the way he described it and the passion he had for it, and not to mention everything I fixed, it worked. I was a little bit more excited, and it was more goals, and it was more attainable to the point where, well, how can I put it? It just was a consuming thing. So to this day, I still to this day thank Mr. Edward for his generosity, because without him, I think I would never be in that directional path.
Wow, that is fantastic. I don't think I ever heard this part of the story, and we've been together a long time. But let me ask you a couple questions, as far as, because you touched upon about that, in the minority community, that there weren't really that many mechanics, and that there was this stigma when you asked the question about how a vehicle works. And I know for myself, driving, that we get in our cars and we're not really knowledgeable about the inner workings of a vehicle. And so that moment when you were told, or maybe had that experience, what was that aha moment for you to say, you know what? I'm going to figure out for myself what this is all about. And then the second part of the question is, why do you think there was a lack of knowledge in terms of the mechanic field back in the day when you were growing up?
Well, if I had to choose a aha moment, basically I was sitting and watching a tire being changed, and I was wondering why they kept changing the tire, because it looked like it was still rubber on it.
I think we all say that.
And I was like, why are they so important? Mm-hmm. So one of the mechanics, I don't know his name, he walked over to me and said, "You want to see what we're doing?" And when I walked over there, he said, "You see this part of the tire? This is the part of the tire that touches the ground." Now, I thought the whole tire touched the ground. Okay. You would think that.
Right, yeah.
But apparently there are sections of the tire that are only supposed to touch the ground, and there are sections of the tire that's supposed to protect the tire from curbs and bumps and potholes. And the part that kept being changed is the part that being touched on the ground. And I was like, well, why does the rubber ever leave? And he said, because it's friction. I didn't understand the concept of friction. So what he did was he clapped his hands and rubbed them.
He clapped his hands
and clapped his hands really hard.
Okay.
And he rubbed them really fast.
Okay.
And then he put them on my arm. And I said, that's hot.
Uh-huh.
He said, that's what your tire goes through.
Gotcha.
So I clapped my hands and I rubbed my hands really, really, really fast. And I was like, he said, that's friction. And the more you rub, the more you'll lose whatever surface you're rubbing. And believe it or not, I rubbed my hands raw because I wanted to see it.
How old were you when that happened?
I was like maybe about 10.
10,
13.
Okay, 10 or 13. Okay.
You know, so that was an aha moment.
Okay.
You know, that's when I would realize that the reason why people bring their cars in because the cars is not forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's something is being used and you need to replace it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the second question was how hard it was to gain knowledge back in. One of the reasons I think back then in those days, but now I know, is the fact that knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
If you just think about it, if anybody out there that has a certain uncle, a certain cousin, and a certain brother or father, and that person who's good with automobiles, everybody in the family goes to that person. No one seems to understand about what they're driving except this one person. And when you go over to this person's house, he always has cars everywhere because everybody seems to want his knowledge, want to fix it. They trust him to do something because I didn't understand how important a car really was back then. But then I think about it. If you share knowledge, you really share part of yourself. You cannot explain something to someone without explaining a little bit of yourself in that. So when you go to people, back in those days, I went to the mechanics. There were some people who was happy to share their knowledge, and I got to know them, and it was very fun, and it was exciting. But then there was always a couple of individuals who didn't want me to watch what they did. Because you're looking at their mistakes.
Gotcha.
You're looking at them guessing. You're looking at them wondering if this is the right thing versus the wrong thing. So when you start seeing that insecurity in people, they shut down. Mechanics, believe it or not, is more of a self-assurance. You have to really believe what you're doing on that vehicle because when that person jumps in that car, he believes in you, that you fixed it. So it's a lot of
safety thing going on.
It's a lot of confidence in what you're doing. Some people just don't want to share that.
Wow. I never even thought about that because I had a family member. Clearly, we have actually two family members, and everybody brought their vehicle to these two brothers that really knew how to fix vehicles. And every week, he had a new vehicle that he was driving up and down the street. He never really owned the vehicle. I'm pretty sure the people listening has that one relative that always seems to have a car with no tags and always know how to fix a vehicle, but fixes everybody else's vehicle. And we don't think about that. When we get on our cars and we're driving down the street, we trust that vehicle is working properly, that, like you said, the tires are running on the ground. We're thinking, oh, that's what they're supposed to do. I personally, this is the first time I've learned that the tire is supposed to have certain areas where it's supposed to touch the ground and not. Now, to me, the whole tire touched the ground. I'm like you. I'm not even thinking about that. I just get in the car, push the button, it turns on, and boom. But when people look at an engine, to me, you looking at an engine, I always say this, you looking at an engine is like me looking at a circuit board or a computer circuit board. I don't really understand it. And so, I know you went to Lincoln Technical Institute and you got a chance to learn some additional stuff. So talk a little bit about your experiences there with the other students and just learning about mechanics and talking to the other students about what you learned and what you taught, because at one point you were kind of teaching what you knew from real life, which is what I'm really advocating on this platform, is people coming back from the field. So talk a little bit about Lincoln Technical Institute and how you did that.
Well, Lincoln Technical Institute was a very big part of legitimizing the fact that I'm a mechanic. The thing with mechanic is, if you break something apart enough and put it back together, you become some sort of experienced or expert in it. And I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm going to regress a little bit. And I'm going to go to the statement you said, I just get into the car and hit the button.
Yeah, I do. I get in the car and hit the button.
Now,
I do.
Back then, you turn the key, ignition. Okay? And back then, cars was much more simpler. It was much more mechanical. You know, before the transmission turned automatic, you had the clutch. Before you can turn the wheel with one finger, you had non-power steering. So back then, it was, once a person can break open that car, you can fix a car with a screwdriver, a ratchet, you know, with some elbow grease. Go in there, take the heads off the engine, and redo the piston seals and things of that nature, because the car was simpler. It was, you know, it was pretty much fire and fuel. Okay. As I got older, after being taught that, hey, you know, you can mess with the pins inside of a carburetor, or fuel flow, floaters, and things of that nature, cars became a whole lot more complicated when the multi-port engine came out. Now you started dealing with electronics, especially think foreign cars like BMW, Audi, Mercedes. They started dealing with valvetrain movement. Then you're dealing with solenoids activating certain parts of the car only activates at certain miles an hour. Now you got cars all of a sudden that's doing braking for you, backing up for you, driving for you. Basically, all of those things that the human body usually do is now doing by switches. Switches and wires. Old mechanics like me, when I was getting to that age before Lincoln Tech, I was being outdated.
Wow. Okay. That's so interesting the way.
So basically, Lincoln Tech brought the legitimizing the fact that they taught me a current way of thinking when I diagnose a car. I got to give it to the teachers. You know, a lot of people say those who cannot do teach. I totally disagree with that, because these teachers love what they do at Lincoln Tech. I mean, these teachers built engines, built transmissions, built differentials, constructed bodies from scrap metal, upholstery. I mean, just for fun, we blew up airbags. I mean, come on. I mean, I really found out how many controlled hazards in a car that people feel comfortable around. And then Lincoln Tech also brought out in me the linear thinking and to calm myself down when I get to a problem. I met a lot of young people who pretty much started for one reason. Their uncle did it. Their cousin did it. Other people did it. No one really came into Lincoln Tech saying, I want to be a mechanic. They was looking at the job opportunity. A couple of I would say dealerships will offer that, hey, we give you $100,000 plus whatever bonus this. But so they was looking at the money, and I was looking at the young people. Now I'm older. I'm like 30-something years old, sitting in this classroom looking at kids around 19, 17, 20, 22. And I'm looking at them, looking at the cars, and they only see, I just want to get out this class. They don't see the wealth of information and the job security they can have if they just took this seriously. But because I had knowledge in some of the principles that they were teaching, they decided to put a group of kids with me. Now, it wasn't just trying to teach kids about cars. You had to break into the interest of a car.
So in other words, you had to really get into their mind space. And okay, well, let me ask you another question before you get to the next section. Did you find that there were more minorities this time in terms of young people being in the class when you were there?
No. So actually, it was It was Asian. It was Latino. It was just
everybody but
everybody.
but minority. Okay.
Everybody was equal almost. I mean,
Okay.
you had Caucasian. You had, you know.
But as far as black young men,
Yes, it was. It was heavily. It was a lot more African Americans there.
yeah, that's what I was asking. It was a lot more.
Oh, it was. It was very satisfying to know. When I was growing up, they only was seen as either janitor or I want to be a teacher or this, that, and the other, which is a good profession. But when I was sitting in that classroom at 30-something years old, looking at kids who are 20-something, and I'm like, this is my race. You know, this is the next generation.
The next generation of mechanics.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So you were about to go into their mind space, and you're about to teach this class, and then what happened?
First, with a child, you have to make it very interesting for them attention span to stay on something. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I did, and I love the teacher who showed me how to do this, I took an airbag and exploded it in the class. Now people are like, oh, you exploded an airbag. Airbags have little miniature explosive devices on the back of it.
Wow.
But we did it in class. It was controlled, but they didn't expect it, and they were like, oh, what is that? That is in your steering wheel. Wow. And you so mean tell me we're driving around with that in my steering wheel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I started the class off with, if you had to change this and you triggered it, that would have been in your face. Mm-hmm. So that quieted everybody down. Okay. It was like, wow, controlled explosion that we're going to be working with. Mm-hmm. And that opened the door to basically troubleshooting solenoids, basically going into the harness of an engine. It was mostly electrical. And then we moved into the actual rebuilding of an engine. Now, a lot of people are like, why didn't you start off with the brakes? Why didn't you start off with the tires? Because the engine itself is kind of alluring. You start off with ignition. You start off with fuel. You start off with air. And then basically you just have a big cylinder that's being compressed, and it blows up. So to kids, just blowing stuff up was the interest that got them really just learning so much from you, and then you're learning so much from them, and then that kind of just evolved into a huge learning work, type of thing for you, right? It was a trust.
Okay.
They actually trusted me to control these explosions and trusted me to explain to them why it's exploding. And I trusted them to be honest with me on how I'm teaching.
Okay.
Like I said, you cannot teach anyone without giving parts of yourself.
Right.
That basically opened my mind up a little bit broader to automotive or transportation, because it lets me know that I still have more to learn.
Okay.
So Lincoln Tech was a very big part. I'm very proud of the fact that I went. Even though I went in, I was very arrogant. I was like, I'm a mechanic already. I've been in the field for like 10 years. I got tools, this, that, and the other. But working with those kids, they let me know that, hey, share what you got.
Right, share what you have. Right. So you ended up learning all this stuff, and then you came out and actively started pursuing your ASC certifications. Talk a little bit about how important it is to go for your certification programs in a field like this, based on your experience in terms of just your status, your salary expectations, what type of jobs that you can get. Because I want the young men who is listening to this to also feel empowered that they can be a mechanic, but also know the benefits and the obstacles of trying to become a mechanic and what is really needed to do the job. Because anybody can pick up a wrench and fix stuff, but if you're trying to make this a profession, what is it that you really need that's going to get you to where you want to be and make the money you want?
That's a very good question, because when you come out of Lincoln Tech, everybody thinks that you come out with an ASE. ASC basically stands for Automotive Service Excellence. Okay, it's a certification that a bunch of other mechanics who have been in the field for more than 30 years got together and came up with this questionnaire, answering question. And if you can actually pass that questionnaire, they give you a certificate. Now, The ASC, and this is one of the things that I was taught that really made sense. ASCs will help you get the job. ASE will help you get the job, but it won't help you keep it. It won't help you keep it.
So explain a little bit more about that.
Before I went to Lincoln Tech, I always wanted to get an ASE. Studying was very hard for me because as you get older, it's hard to study to retain the information. But the young folks that were coming into the field, they were heavy in book knowledge, but technically they couldn't hold a fork. Okay? They would talk to you about programs. They would talk to you about formulas. They would talk to you about thermodynamics on books. But if you give them a wrench, they're like, what I do with this? Now, normally you don't really get floored when people ask you to teach them something new. But it's almost as if he skipped the process. And he had ASC's master certifications.
But he didn't know how to use the tool.
He didn't understand the tool.
Oh, he didn't understand the tool.
He didn't understand the process.
Okay.
How can you skip the process? And a lot of the people that came out of school back in those days, I guess they were trying to push him in, push him out. But when you're working on people's cars, you're working on people's livelihoods, you really need to understand the process on how things work on their vehicle. And just because you have a certification doesn't mean you understand. All I'm saying is this. When you come out of school, you need to meet up with a mechanic who's willing to teach you the processes. It's okay to come out book knowledge, but if you just have enough understanding that you need to get some hands-on experience. Hands-on experience go a long way. The reason why I went to Lincoln Tech, because what stopped me was I hit the glass ceiling. I had the hands-on experience, but I couldn't make the money I was looking for because I didn't have the paperwork. I didn't have the certifications.
Okay.
I couldn't pass the ASE because I couldn't retain the information. I went to Lincoln Tech, and they taught me very well on how to retain what the names were, what people use the names for. And when I came out of Lincoln Tech, I started getting my ASC certifications back to back. It wasn't because I was stupid. It was the fact that I can put the mental picture to the word.
Right.
So the ASC knowledge, it never stops.
Right.
It never stops.
Because it's one of those certifications that you have to renew after a certain period of time, every 5 years.
Yeah.
So you have to constantly stay abreast of the new technologies and things of that nature. So right now you also do double duty. You work as a mechanic, and then you also do nighttime managing staff, and you've gone on to help these organizations really streamline their processes. And so as you are learning more technology-based engines and more technology has been integrated in vehicles, let's just talk briefly about the importance of making sure that people who want to get in this industry understand that engines are no longer, like you said earlier, it's no longer the norm. It is literally a computer on wheels. You know what I'm saying? And science, math, all those type of STEM educations, let's talk about how that really integrates into the mechanic field if someone wants to be a mechanic, because it's no longer, like you said, the wrench is now computer circuit boards now.
That's true. Basically, now vehicles are being diagnosed with computers on computers. The more I can really see my age. The more the car get more complicated, the more diagnosing tools become complicated, and the elder mechanics, they just stop learning. Okay, and that's where our shortage is. The more our shortage is, the level of technology for cars is increasing faster than the mechanic itself learning to fix them. When you children in school and they trying to get into this field, mathematics is very important. Mathematics is important when it comes to brakes, comes to the rotor, comes to the pads. Mathematics is very important when it comes to the slash when you're trying to do a tune-up and you have to do the valves. Mathematics is very important when it comes to the computer itself. You just don't go inside and start hitting just random buttons. I mean, you have to actually give the computer a parameter to run these things, and it will bring up an error and the car will not run properly. Wow. Okay. Physics, you have to understand physics, especially in suspension, stabilizer, shocks, struts.
And this is not just for cars. This is for motorcycles, boats. This is for trains, any kind of engine, right?
Anything that physically moves that make contact with a surface and deals with gravity.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Because when your car making a turn to the left at 20 miles an hour, you slowly move to the left or the right to counterpart that. But the weight distribution of the car itself, the sprung and unsprung weight of the springs, that's holding thousands upon thousands of pounds.
Yeah, thousands of pounds.
So
I don't think a lot of people realize that when, again, we're just getting in our vehicles. We're not thinking about the inertia or the movement of the vehicle and how fast we're going and how much force that it's going to take to stop the vehicle, because all the stuff you're describing is all the inner workings of a vehicle. But I guess what I was getting at is that if you're going to be getting in any type of transportation, anything, and when it comes to a vehicle, a plane, a motorcycle, or anything that turns and involves an engine, you definitely have to learn your STEM skills. And this goes all the way back in school, like science, math, English, all that kind of stuff. It comes into play. And it doesn't really matter, because if you're going into the transportation field, even if you are to become a pilot for an airplane, you still have to know mathematics. You still have to know physics. You still have to know science, right?
And you start off with the fact that you have to do so much reading. Reading is your best friend in the transportation field. Researching, learning how to research something is your best friend when you're in the transportation field. Communication, learning how to talk to an individual to get information from them. Every subject you think that you get out of school itself, now be it reading, math, even geography, because then you got to find out where the parts are coming from, how long the parts is going to get to you from this particular location, and how much it's going to cost from that particular location. And the car itself, not to mention the fact that if you get a car from overseas, like most people end up bringing their cars over here, their car is set up with a higher altitude, lower altitude, and they bring them to United States or some part of the United States, and why is my car acting funny? And then they all of a sudden tell you, oh yeah, we did bring this car from overseas, and yeah, it was 15,000 miles above sea level. And you be like, well, now you're 1,000 miles above sea level, so now your car is sluggish, and your car is overheating, and your car is this. So those different points in school itself, you have to really take that with you, because it will show.
Yeah, it will come back.
It will come. I mean, if you're not good at math, you will find out really quick. If you're not good in reading, trust me, you'll be only stuck in one spot in this particular field. If you don't grasp the educational part early, you're not going to go far in this field.
Right. And speaking about going far, let's talk about some of the salary expectation, because I know you told me for many years that mechanics is one of those fields that seem to be less important, but is the most important. And the pay follows. So, there's there's a lot of shortage of good mechanics. And there are places where you can make really good money. But how do you achieve that? You talked about the ASC, you talked about education. But from a business acumen standpoint, from just somebody who has the initiative to find the right opportunity, what would you advise for someone to go out there and do to get to where you are right now as a manager working in the transportation field?
Learn your market. Basically, you got to learn your market. For example, there is money to be had as a mechanic or a technician. People buy high-end cars, expect to pay high-end money. So if you're going into a field where you just change tires, well, that's all you're going to be doing is just changing tires. That's tires to us here in the United States are a dime a dozen. You just remove the 5 or 10 lugs and then you balance your tire, you put them on. That's what, $12 an hour? But that's all you know. So let's say you move up to brakes. Let's say at this particular point you go out and get your ASC in brakes. Now you are physically becoming responsible for the safety of the car. That's more money. Mm-hmm. Because now the customer trusts you, the people who hired you trust you. Mm-hmm. So now you are in a position where you are valuable.
Okay.
You learned something different, and you have a certification in it. So you're looking at maybe about $20, $22 an hour at this point.
And what if you're a diesel mechanical, fleet mechanical, maybe a construction worker working on different construction vehicles?
Now, speaking of the heavy duty stuff, heavy duty or diesel is a particular field. Diesel is very different from a gasoline engine in itself, not to mention the weight that it carries and the equipment that truck hauls that you have to be knowledgeable for. So that means that you're going to have to go read up, go to school, increase your certifications itself to work on these things. And basically you can make a good $50,000, $60,000 working in that particular field. Now, you will be outside.
Yeah, you will.
You will be outside. You will be working in the elements because these trucks are element-driven trucks. Mm-hmm. You also looking at the fact that these trucks also carry technologies that are now computer-based. So now you have to become more into laptops. Mm-hmm. Now you have to become more into multiplexing systems. And you're looking at this truck and you're like, that's a rusty looking truck. But this truck has 2017, 2018 technology on it, operates itself, even though it looks rusted. Mm-hmm. This truck represents $200,000 to $300,000. Mm-hmm. And your job is to keep this truck running. Because as long as that truck is not running, it's not making money. Mm-hmm. So therefore, you are valuable.
So that makes you more valuable because you have the skills to keep it moving.
Bingo.
Okay.
And that only happens because you put the work into learning.
Right.
And this is very important for those who are listening. Ready? This is very important.
I'm ready.
No matter how smart you are, you can't fix nothing without tools.
You gotta have tools. That's right. You gotta have tools.
Have the mechanic. Mm-hmm. I never met a mechanic who didn't have a toolbox.
Okay. Well, there's some that have toolbox, but right?
Who did not have.
They did not have a toolbox. Okay.
That mechanic, who is the best in the world, his tools is what makes him too. Okay. So when you go on interviews and you want the money, I want $60,000, I want $70,000. You're getting part of that because of your tools. Because I have tools in my toolbox for $300 for one wrench. I have a $2,000 scanner just to scan trucks. I mean, there are enough tools in my toolbox to range about a good $40,000. The toolbox alone is $20,000, $30,000. So you're going to invest in yourself before anyone invests in you.
Exactly.
So that's when, story time. When I first broke into the mechanic field professionally, I came in with a Craftsman hand box, an assortment of hand tools, working on diesel trucks. And this is when I found my love for electrical, because that's all I can do. Okay? People was running rings around me. It took me 3 hours to change a mud flap on a truck. And that's just nothing but a bolt and a nut. I didn't have the air gun. I didn't have the sufficient tool. I got fired after 3 days.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But he taught me something, though. He said, the guy who let me go, he wasn't very, angry or menacing or nothing. He just told me, if you want to be a mechanic, you have to invest in your tools. And I took that with me, and every other day I go to the pawn shop and buy a tool. You know the arguments we had.
Oh yeah, we do. We do. Tools are expensive. They are. And one of the other benefits too, and I would say during tax time, is that you can actually write off these tools that you purchase throughout the year as work-related equipment. And so I know we're getting down to the end of the interview time. I guess in my thought process, when you were talking about the importance of tools, it's no different than having the importance of your knowledge, like going to school. If you don't have the tools, you can't fix. If you can't fix, you can inadvertently kill someone if you don't know what you're doing as a mechanic. And so to summarize for everybody who's listening in this podcast is that if you're looking to get into the transportation field, to work on buses or trucks, or even drive a train or a plane or anything that involves a motor vehicle or engine, you really have to take the time to invest in your knowledge, your school, your skills, your certifications. If you're trying to really make some money and a good career out of this, you can go so far by just asking questions and reaching out to older mechanics like Mike and some of the other people that you know that fix vehicles, and just really just look at the resources that you have and take advantage of that, because you can't do anything without investing in yourself.
Knowledge is half the battle. Fortitude is the other half. You have to keep... I've hit my head on the wall plenty of times. Like today. You really hit some problems with cars that you'd be wondering if I could just meet the person who designed it. I just want to meet them. But a good mechanic never gives up. If you reach your limit, find a way to go around it or above it or over it. Because over it, you'll find out that there are more limits to climb. Okay? And don't forget about taking your tools with you.
That's right. That's right. And you know what? Speaking of that real quick, I know one of the things that you did too to get a job really quickly was that you not only bought the tools, but you took a picture of every single tool that you had and actually laminated them or put them in a folder, so when you went on interviews, you showed them the tools that you had. And that even makes you more valuable. And I don't want to forget to do that. But all in all, this whole interview is really more about to make awareness of an industry.
But I got a story.
Oh no, another story.
All right, look, now these are for individuals who's trying to get a job.
Okay, we don't want.
All right, because now that you got the education and your uncle taught you how to fix some things, and he gave you his toolbox, and now you got a master toolbox and everything. So you go to the interview, and I'm only using myself as an example because I have a lot of mechanics who come to me and I worked on this truck and worked on these engines and worked on this and worked on that. And I ask this simple question. What is the single most tool you use out of your toolbox? See, that kind of defines you. Do you use your wrench? Do you use your diagnostic tool? Do you use your multimeter? Do you use a screwdriver? Do you use a socket set? See, there's different levels of mechanic. You got a C mechanic, D mechanic, A mechanic, B mechanic. And those different levels of mechanics dictate where you are. But some people think that they're A mechanics or B mechanics. Nobody ever considered themselves C mechanics or D mechanics. Mm-hmm. So when I ask them that question, what's the single most tool you use out of your toolbox almost every day? So some people go, I don't understand the question. I say, okay, fine. How about we do this? Can you describe the drawer in your toolbox that you always go into? That's when they find out where they stand. You only go and pull out a socket. That means somebody telling you what to fix. You didn't diagnose anything.
Okay.
You pull out a multimeter. That means that somebody's always telling you to troubleshoot an electrical issue. So that means you will be a mechanic. If you pull out a diagnostic or a computer or laptop all the time to hook up to the back of a engine, that means basically that you're a mechanic, because they always want you to find the problem, not always fix the problem.
Right.
Okay.
So this is really no different as just knowing your information and your skill set when you go to an interview. So basically, in effect, you're saying if you go into an interview, know your tools, know how to diagnose, know to expect the unexpected question, especially when it comes to fixing stuff. Because I know when I interview people for technology positions, I ask similar questions. I ask them what they know how to troubleshoot and how they handle customers and how they give out excellent, customer service. And if they're not giving me something that is going to conform to their skills and their background, then it makes it that much difficult to gauge their expertise in that field. And so that's really also important as well.
Yeah.
And don't exaggerate, because it will
show.
It will show in the end.
It will show.
Anyway, Michael, I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your information and knowledge for those who are looking to get into the transportation and mechanic field. It is really a dynamic and diverse industry that is well needed out here today, because vehicles are always changing, and just because technology is taking over doesn't mean that we do not need mechanics out there to fix them. And just being an advocate for younger people who are interested in learning more about mechanics as well. So thank you for being also the co-founder of ALSTNTEC and supporting this program for us to be able to do workshops that is going to foster business and career.
Yes. I'm just here to support as many of the young people in this area I can. And basically, we really need to understand what our young people need to survive in this future that we have. So
yeah, you need to do one with me more often.
Believe me.